Thank you again for allowing me to speak. I want to thank all of you for being here. Also, this is a horrible crime that happens right here in the United States. As you've all said today, I represent the border area in California, represent San Diego County, Imperial County. It's a horrible crime there. And I have to say, I have been working with the federal prosecutors because we do have some problems in the federal law, laws that we can change. And in fact, I've sponsored a bill, H.R. 1690, which does this. Right now, a prosecutor has to prove that a sex trafficker knew the child was a child. It's very difficult to do, to prove that the trafficker knew that the child was a child. So what this bill says is that you don't have to prove, the government doesn't have to prove that this pimp knew that the child was a child. The government has to prove that the child is a child. So the government just proves that this person is a pimp. He was sex trafficking this child. The prosecutors say that that'll go a long way in being able to put people away. We are working with the prosecutors in San Diego, and a very courageous young woman that escaped from these pimps, and her pimp ultimately got 30 years because she did have the courage and she did have the wherewithal to stand up in court, which is very difficult for a child to do, but to be able to put this guy away for 30 years. And that's what we will be able to do if we can change the law. So I would hope that maybe we could get behind that bill. It's H.R. 1690. I think it's a very good bill. And I agree, we glorify oftentimes the pimp, and we re-victimize the victim, and in this case, a child. So we need to change federal law also right here in the United States to be able to go after these people. Supervisor Kanabe, you've been a hero to many of us in this area. Would you like to comment on that particular law, or change?
Well, I think
hopefully
this
change
week
the law?
you're going to have 5 young heroines here who had the willingness to stand up, and 5 victims that are survived that are coming into town. You know, that whatever tools are necessary. When you go back to the question about what we can do, we can only do so much. But given the tools like an H.R. 1690 or others, that would really help us at the local level, work with our federal prosecutors. You know, the higher we're able to raise this whole issue as it relates to the penalties, the better off we are that we're going to be able to, once we ID the folks, get them to court, do all the things that we need to do, that we have the laws that are on the books that everybody will recognize and can put these people away, whether it's 30 years, whether it's 60 years, whether it's 90 years. But at the end of the day, you know, we need to wrap our arms around these young ladies to give them the courage. And that's the whole purpose behind the collaborative courtroom.
Thank you. And again, I would like to note that it is very difficult, however, for a child to stand up in court because the opposing counsel's tough. You're before all these people. You know, we need to change this law. I mean, we absolutely need to change this federal law to say, no, you know, if you're a sex trafficker, if you're sex trafficking these children, the government has to prove that you're doing that. But it ought to be strict liability if it's a child. You're going to go away for a long period of time because otherwise they have to, unfortunately, give them a light sentence because the child doesn't want to or can't go and testify. So I'm hopeful that we can get behind the law and change it right here. Would you like to comment on that, Mr. Miles? I know that we're reaching out to your group, and would you like to comment?
I think you're pointing out an important issue. I knew of one federal case where they were trying to prove that the pimp knew that the child was a child. And there happened to be this bizarre occurrence where actually the father of the child had been hunting his child down for months trying to recover her. And he finally learned she was in a hotel room, and he kicked in the hotel room door, and he saw the pimp in the room with his child, who was a minor, and he said, "You so-and-so, she's not yet 18, I'm her father." And that father was able to testify in courtroom to say, I informed him that the child, that he knew that the child was a child because he heard me say that she was my daughter. Yeah. But how many times does that actually happen in a case where you could actually find the father who hunts that down? So I think you're right. I think that you're zeroing in on an important area of the law where to prove that the trafficker knew that the child was a child in a random occurrence where the father burst into the hotel room and had to say it, that lightning has to strike for that to happen. So I think that we can't rely on that to get this many pimps at scale, to create the deterrent effect at scale that we need to.
Well, many of them are runaways to begin with.
That's right. And oftentimes what the prosecutor has to do has to search the records, show that the pimp used his own credit card because the child didn't have the credit card, a whole bunch of things to prove that the person knew. So it's very difficult. I hope we can get behind this bill.